Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me over to Audubon tonight to present this program. It was first presented over a year ago when the Frankford L celebrated its 100th anniversary in November of 2022. And that's what prompted the work that we're going to see tonight, both the slide presentation as well as the book that you see before you. It didn't start out to be this much this comprehensive, but as we started digging into the subject matter, we started to uncover a lot of new and interesting information that I thought would be helpful to present, and apparently people like it. The book you see in front of you is available tonight. We'll sign copies in the back, and proceeds go to the Historic Society of Frankfurt. I guess bio information. I started out at SEPTA in 1975 as a bus driver. I was fortunate enough to be in the planning group eventually, and when the railroad was taken over, they needed people that had some experience with railroad operations. At that time, I was an enthusiast that translated my knowledge into a nice career. It lasted until about 2013 when a position opened up at Amtrak, and I worked over at Amtrak for 7 years in Northeast Corridor Service Planning, and it's been an enjoyable journey. And since I've retired, I am now doing, I'm writing books, and that's why we're here tonight. So tonight's program is called Frankfurt's Elevated Railway and its Predecessors. Sorry. The train is in the station. I would like to express recognition and appreciation for the following groups that provided content for this program and for the book. And it's a long list. Now, this is interesting. I had to correct this slide this afternoon because I knew it was coming, and then lo and behold, they did redesignate the Market Frankford Line to Route L. So I had to modify the slide to be appropriate for this evening's presentation. The red box on the right is the area where we'll cover tonight, which is the Frankford Elevated portion of the L. And that's what we'll see. So in Frankfurt, Frankfurt was a community that was on the King's Highway, and it received a lot of traffic between Philadelphia and New York, and its importance grew over time as a layover point for stagecoaches, and eventually it involved a lot of expansion in population, and as a result, in 1833, the Philadelphia and Trenton Railroad, which was built between Morrisville and Kensington, we'll talk about that later, established a stop there. 1858, the Frankford and Suffolk Railway extended rail service, street railway service up there. 1894, the Philadelphia and Frankfurt Railroad came into play. And then electric trolleys the same year, and the Frankfurt and Elevated and Bustleton trolley. But you can see they all sort of met right in Frankfurt. So here's the program contents for tonight: the Philadelphia and Trenton Railroad, the Frankford and Suffolk Railroad, surface streetcars, Philadelphia and Frankfurt Railroad, the Frankford Elevated planning and components, the construction, a companion project to the Frankford Elevated, which was the Frankford, Bustleton, and Byberry Surface Passenger Railway, which is a mouthful, otherwise known as Route 59. We'll cover the opening celebration, commencement of service, and then briefly touch on the next 100 years of the Frankford Elevated, which we'll really get into next month. So starting with the Philadelphia and Trenton Railroad, you can see that it went through Frankfurt and it ended in Kensington. It started in 1833 as a horse car operation. It ran from Morrisville down to Front and Montgomery Streets, which was later renamed to Palmer. And then within a few years, steam locomotives were introduced quickly. And then in 1839, they reached Trenton. Reaching Trenton was a challenge. I'm going to digress here for a minute because there was an old bridge, an 1806 bridge, I believe it was, that was connecting New Jersey and Pennsylvania at that point. And it blockaded the access of through rail operation. But eventually they got the cars across that bridge after reinforcement. And then ultimately in the 1870s, I believe, steel bridges were used. And then finally those steel bridges were replaced by the bridge we see today. But the point I wanted to make is the steel bridges were reused. They were taken down and floated down to the Potomac River and placed in position to create the long bridge. A couple of the spans of the long bridge that's still in operation today are those same steel spans. So the Philadelphia and Trenton operated with horse cars, as you can see on the left, a typical horse car. And then in 1835, they introduced steam locomotives, which is not what we're used to seeing today, and with more modern examples still running. But there's the Black Hawk built by Baldwin. I had that picture for 50 years for some reason in a book, and I never knew why I held on to it for that length of time, but as you can see, it came in handy tonight. So Frankford Station was on Church Street, and you can see there's a glass plate negative image on the left from the Historic Society of Frankfurt. I believe we're looking inbound there, which is odd because the station is on the outbound side. The Frankfurt sign that you see, I believe that recently sold at auction for close to $1,600. I didn't bid on it. My Frankfurt station continued to grow. By 1906, under the PRR operation, you can see there were two rather large station buildings on either side of the trackage, and a lot of freight activity with public delivery tracks on the left and commercial activity on the right. So it really became quite a busy station. But down in Kensington, it was a problem because they couldn't get past Front and Palmer Streets. They wanted to run the steam engines down the city streets into Philadelphia, but the residents were opposed to it. And they made their opposition known, quite frankly, by burning down one of the presidents of the railroad building to the ground. And he got the point, and that resulted in them stopping at Palmer Street and building terminal stations there. Station on the right is a passenger station. It was built in later days, and we'll see a little bit more about that later. This is where those complexes were at Palmer Street and Norris along front. There's Birch Street Station of the L today, as we can call it. What's that over on the left? Well, that's the North Penn station, which also was challenged because they couldn't get any further with steam operations, so they had to transfer their passengers for Center City trips to horse cars. To get downtown, the connecting railroad was developed by the Philadelphia and Trenton, and with support by the Pennsylvania Railroad, and it allowed the trackage to go from what was created as Frankfort Junction down to Mantua, where they could connect to trackage which led into 32nd and Market on the PRR side. And that's where their main station was in Philadelphia until 1881, when Broad Street Station was built. They extended the trackage across the Schuylkill River down along Filbert Street with a city block wide right-of-way, ending just opposite City Hall. And I'll call to your attention that there's a cable car there. One of the infrequent use of cable cars in Philadelphia. They used them along Market Street, and it has a trailer being towed. So in 1858, streetcars came upon the scene. The Frankford and Suffolk passenger railway opened to Frankfurt. First, it went down to 5th and Morris Streets. Then this is the depot at 5th and Jackson. Streetcar, or the horse car that you see there, has a sign on the side of it that says Lincoln Park.
That was an entertainment complex where the horse cars would bring passengers to celebrate the free time along the Delaware River. The trackage came up Front Street, used Kensington, and ended at Frankford Avenue with a northern extension in 1858. Here's a typical horse car operating on the streets up until around 1860. In 1860, they started experimenting with steam-powered streetcars. And as you can see, there's an unusual vehicle. They call them dummies. The challenge was to develop a vehicle that did not scare horses. And they came up with different designs. One was to encase the steam engine into a coach type vehicle. But one of the things that did really affect the horses was the side rods. The motion of the side rods with steam engines really seemed to have an adverse effect on horses, more so than the steam and the sound of the engine. There's a drawing of a typical horse car, steam dummy. The depot was located up at Arrett Street. That was built in 1858. That the route was so successful after it was converted to steam dummies in 1863 that they built this iconic steam dummy depot on Oxford Avenue. It had a clock, witch's hat clock tower, and it's quite interesting to see that there's a photo studio next to the depot. We'll learn more about that later. So the steam dummy operation was considered quite successful because it ran for 31 years. They towed trailers. The horse car bodies were used as trailers to be towed by the steam dummies, and they would even install sort of bleacher type seating on top to add more seating capacity. And then after 31 years in service, you would think that these vehicles look pretty tired, but they were not scrapped. They were sold, and they were reused for service in the Delaware Water Gap, Delaware County, and down at the shore points. And this is where that steam dummy was located. Steam dummy depot was located on Oxford Avenue. But here comes the electric streetcar. And this is one of the first cars. I don't know if it's the first, but it certainly seems like everybody's trying to get on that car. Coming into Frankfurt, just around Unity Street. And in the background, it's hard to see, but it's actually the Philadelphia and Frankfurt Railroad Depot, which also opened in 1894. The trackage got extended first up to Harrison Street along Frankford Avenue, and then when they wanted to go further up to Bridge Street, there was a controversy between the city of Philadelphia and the operating company, Union Traction, and the city of Philadelphia wanted them to be able to improve the street when they extended their trackage. And there was a period of dispute, but ultimately the company agreed, and trackage got extended up to Bridge Street in 1896. On the other side of Bridge Street, there was another trolley company called the Holmesburg, Tacony, and Frankfurt Street Railway Company. Now, that's a mouthful. So the local residents came up with a new name, and they called it the Hop, Toad, and Frog. In 1910, that company fell on hard times. It got reorganized, and they revised the name to be Frankfurt, Tacony, and Holmesburg, but everybody still called it the Hop, Toad, and Frog. They had two routes, one that went up Frankford Avenue to the county line with Bucks County, and sometimes the trackage did go through, and in the summer season, trolleys were operated through into Lower Bucks County. The second route went down Bridge Street on Union Traction trackage, and then over up to the Frog trackage on Tacony State Road, Tacony Street, State Road, and then back up Broad Street to Frankford Avenue. There was a third route considered, but once their financial hardship was experienced in 1910, the route to Bustleton had to be, consideration of the route to Bustleton had to be dropped. one of the mysteries of this project has been the car on the right. It's a rather large car. It's certainly lettered for the Frankfurt Taconian Holmesburg Street Railway, but the rosters that I've seen have not showed a car of that size. So I'm not sure if it was ordered and delivered. I doubt if it was. Our next topic is going to be the Philadelphia and Frankfurt Railroad. The Philadelphia and Frankfurt Railroad was a result of the local business community trying to gather resources to build their own railroad or establish their own railroad into Center City. There was a 2.6-mile new portion of right-of-way that was constructed between Frankfurt and a junction with the former Philadelphia, Newtown, and New York right-of-way at Crescentville. And then through that connection, they could get into Center City at 12th and Market in the new Reading Terminal that opened up in 1893. Service, the first train came into Frankfurt on July 1st, 1894, and that is a glass plate negative blown up. And that's just an amazing picture. I've seen that picture many, many times, but not this sharp. On July 2nd, service started, and it ran into Center City. It offered a completely different riding experience than the Philadelphia and Trenton. Here you could go to this somewhat elaborate terminal. It was 2 stories with a cathedral ceiling. Design was attributed to Frankfurt S, and you could find a train waiting for you, as opposed to going to a Philadelphia and Trenton station stop, waiting for the train to arrive, and then looking for a seat on a train that originated somewhere else. Inside here, you could just, you had all the resources available to you. There was a telegraph office that was open 24 hours, waiting rooms, a newsstand, and you could even weigh yourself. There seems to be a scale there. And this is where that depot was, on Frankfurt Avenue near Unity Street. They also had a wait station up at Arrett Street. And you can see that station was provided 30-minute service. So you had a half-hour headway to Center City, and the travel time was about 30 minutes. So this was quite convenient as far as an elevated rail service being provided into Frankfurt. The only problem was price. We talked about the connection to the Philadelphia, Newtown, and New York right-of-way. Here it was in Crescentville, and yes, that was named Frankfurt Junction as well. And then once you arrived at 12th and Market, you went into the Grand Reading Terminal. You had convenient connections to all the department stores on East Market Street. You were within 2 blocks of City Hall. And of course, you had the Reading Terminal Market below the station. But why are we here? We're here tonight to hear about the Frankfurt L. So here we go. So rapid transit comes to Philadelphia. In 1901, franchises were issued by the Philadelphia for several routes. The Market Street franchise was the most coveted. It was acquired by the Union Traction Company. In 1902, that was conveyed over to the Philadelphia Rapid Transit Company, and they commenced construction of the Market Street subway elevated. There was a problem though, because what they didn't seem to anticipate was that the merchants in Center City, Philadelphia, wanted the line to be a subway underneath Market Street. And they started to incur large costs in completing the line between 1903 and 1908. And as a result of that, the city of Philadelphia felt that the private industry or private corporations could not actually finance and build a large project like this and beyond, all the other routes that they had considered building. So they surrendered the franchises back to the city of Philadelphia, except for the Frankford Elevated, and all future lines were to be financed by the city. So what happened? Okay, in 1905, streetcars started operating in a newly constructed tunnel as far as 15th Street from 23rd.
2 years later, the Market Street passenger elevated line opened up. So that was the first rapid transit service into 15th and Market. It was extended in 1908 down Market Street, Front Street, up to a 180-degree turn on Arch to turn down Delaware Avenue and serve two stations at ferry terminals at Market Street and South Street. In 1913, the City of Philadelphia advanced a report that commissioned recommendations on new rapid transit extensions. Frankford Elevated was recommended. Other extensions were Manayunk, Roxborough, and Darby. And that poor guy is trying to maintain all those incandescent light bulbs on the map, the 2-story high map. So the components of the Frankford Elevated, it was a 6.39 mile long 2-track elevated with possible extension to Ron Street. Well, we know that didn't happen, but it was proposed. There were 12 stations with adjacent head house buildings, and that was different than the Market Street subway elevated, where the stations were pretty much underslung the trackage above Market Street. There were 3 bridges to cross the railroads and Lehigh Avenue. There were 100 new rapid transit cars, a new storage and new storage yard for these new cars, and an inspection building. The Frankford Elevated portion in Frankfurt itself, the businesses advocated a single column vent structure design, and that was built that way up through Frankfurt. And there were 3 substations to power the line. Here's the Ron Street extension that was proposed. There were 5 stations, including Levick Street, Conway, Tyson Avenue, Cotman Avenue, and Ron Street. This was carried in Philadelphia's rapid transit plan, I believe, up until 1936. And at the time, I think the cost estimates were in the neighborhood of $9.6 million. But of course, this corridor was left to be served by Route 66, and we'll talk about that in the second program. The separate head houses were intended to improve the riding experience on rapid transit. They had large glass plate panels, which illuminated the interiors of these buildings, so you didn't feel like you were riding in a subway environment. There was new architectural features introduced. You can see that this drawing on the right is quite intricate, and they were all designed to be separate individual constructions. Inside, there was the glass panel illuminating the staircases, which were allowing passengers to board or climb up to the platform while other passengers were coming down off of a train that just had departed the station. On the right is the Hammonds building up at Bridge Street, and that was also the transportation headquarters for the rapid transit service. And of course, there underneath the elevated is a hop toad and frog car on Bridge Street waiting for the L to arrive. And that's essentially because they continued to operate until 1926, even after the L opened up. The station design included steel canopies to protect passengers waiting for the elevated trains. And then on the right, there's another example of where you see a large plate glass window allowing light to come inside the interior of the head house building. And of course, you could buy newspapers and gum, and this was open to the community as well as passengers. We're looking across Frankford Avenue towards Harrod Street in that picture on the right. The bridges, we talked about the 3 bridges. One was over Lehigh Avenue, and one was over the Reading's 10-track approach to Port Richmond Yard. And the third was across the Pennsylvania Railroad trackage up near Shore Tower, which you guys all know about the Shore Tower in South Jersey, providing service into South Jersey. The Lehigh Avenue Bridge was required because you had 2 trolley routes that came down Kensington Avenue and made a right turn onto Lehigh. So there was no way to place columns in the middle of the cartway the way they normally would have. So they went with this 112-foot long structure. There's Shore Tower in a later view, and you can see the elevated from this aerial view crossing over on the way up to Erie Tarsdale. The cars, there were 100 cars involved in the contract. They were built locally by the Bill Company. They sat 51 passengers, maximum standees accommodated were 175. And you can see that design was lateral seating. You're going to see it again because the new cars are going to incorporate that same type of seating arrangement. They were supposed to have ventilation fans in the ceiling in these cars. Of course, you don't see them there. It was an accommodation made for the later installation. And of course, that never happened. The fans were finally came in the new order of cars in 1960.
Did they really have 175 standees in each car?
It could accommodate them. They wouldn't actually do that, but if you had a delay or something like that, you could accommodate it. This, I just recently came across some pictures provided by Larry Ryan, and here you see what is known as the Van Dorn coupler. First 50 cars of the order that the city did the specifications for came with these couplers, which were automatic. You didn't have to have a person on the ground making connections. You could just pull up to the car, couple up, and you would have wired connections through the electric head below the coupler. But the PRTC didn't feel comfortable with that, and they specified that direct connections be continued as they were on the Market Street side. So these couplers weren't used to their full extent. Only 50 cars were built with these couplers, and the rest were just regular couplers with the fixed connections. This is a better view of the coupler. There's a lot of information available at the Illinois Railway Museum collection. But as I said, these couplers were intended to provide workman safety, especially when you're working around third rail, and easier train makeup. So here's the elevated construction. It started in 1915 when they sunk pilings in the soft earth around Willow Street and Kelly Street to support these elevated structures. Of course, in 1915, they were also working on City Hall Station for the Broad Street subway. By 1916, they erected the first section of elevated at Kelly Street. And what you're looking at right now is a bent. It's two columns with a cross member across the top, and they numbered them going north. As you can see on the right, we're at bent number 72 up on, well, it's a little bit further up on Front Street, and they just progressed up to Bridge Street as the numbers increased. You can see that in this case on the left, they're actually building over top of an active railroad, which facilitated delivery of steel members, but it also, they had to be careful about working over an active freight railroad. And you go, well, why would that be so much of a challenge? Well, Schmitz was one of the customers that they served, so you didn't want to interrupt the train serving Schmitz Brewery. Moving along up at Palmer Street, you can see there's the Philadelphia Trenton station, the freight station on the right, and this passenger station, built in 1882, is on the right-hand side picture. And that's an interesting story because the PRR was operating passenger service up until 1910 on the street on Trenton Avenue. And then they elevated the trackage above Trenton Avenue. So you had an elevated service being provided to this location in 1910 up until about 1918. Why the PRR suspended that service, I'm not sure, because the L was delayed because of the World War and the difficulty in getting steel. And of course, the cost of the project doubled. And so people were left stranded for those 4 years without Frankford Elevated service in place. Up at Lehigh Avenue, we talked about the two bridges there. You can see there's a Route 4 car that's come down Kensington Avenue about to turn onto Lehigh. And there's the Railroads YMCA building on the left of the top left picture. And then on the right picture as well. And of course, crews were laid over here after they brought coal trains down to deliver to Port Richmond and take the empties back up to the mines in upstate Pennsylvania. This is the view from the Port Richmond branch trackage looking up at the elevated, and you can see there's a Market streetcar train crossing over. And it was 10 tracks, so they needed a long bridge to traverse this area. This is a map of showing that area. It's located between Somerset and Huntington stations on the Market Frankford, the L as we call it now, Frankford Elevated extension. And now we're up at Church Street entering Frankfurt. So this is the area where the single column vent construction was introduced. You can see it on the right there. There's a Route 4 car stopped, and that construction is around stopped right around Dyer Street, and this is around 1917, and the whole station complex beyond that wasn't built until late, closer to 1922, and that again was because of the World War effort, the availability of steel, and of course the cost doubled to build this line. Moving forward up Frankford Avenue, there's the dummy depot, and there's Oxford Avenue. And the red arrow is showing you where the openings were made underneath Frankford Avenue, because they had to put steel underground, large steel girders and footings out to the curb line to support the single column vent construction. Because when you see it looking at it broadside, there's hardly any support. It's all underground. Up at Bridge Street, there's a 68-ton girder just about to be raised into position. That was necessary because this is where the Frankford Elevated diverged off of Frankford Avenue. But of course, as we know, they were planning to extend it to Ron Street. So the design of the structure accommodated the future extension. Of course, that didn't happen. Starting in 1904, we know that trolleys were up here as early as 1896. In 1904, they built a depot here. This is the transportation building for the motormen and conductors. And here we are down at Front and Arch Street. And I hope this is helpful for you guys. The blue indicates the difference where those buildings are. And you're looking south of Market Street subway elevated. Construction stopped here, as you can see, in 1920. And there was a lot of discussion going on between the city of Philadelphia and the PRTC over the lease of and operation of the line. Philadelphia Rapid Transit Company had some experience with the costs and knowing what they were getting themselves into as far as operating this city of Philadelphia asset. And they weren't coming to terms for quite over a year. City of Philadelphia even considered operating or extending the Frankford Elevated down Arch Street at one point. I don't know if that was a negotiating position, but obviously the connection was made, as you can see on the right, and a junction was created.
What's that gradient on that coming up out of the subway there?
You mean above the red line?
Yeah, where you come up from the Market Street subway onto what's the grade on that?
Oh, the grade. It's really sharp. I want to say 4%. I don't know that for a fact, but it's pretty steep.
Pretty steep, yeah, as I recall.
Because you're really basically, you make a very sharp turn off of Market Street and you're in a subway.
Right.
And then you have to climb out of a subway up onto an elevated Arch Street. So it's got to be sharp. Steep. Now, the companion project to the Frankford Elevated was the Frankford, Bustleton, and Byberry Surface Passenger Railway. Now that's a mouthful. But as you can see on the letterboard there, they had Byberry placed on the letterboard of the car. So this was intended to be a high capacity 2-track trolley operation from Frankfurt all the way through Bustleton up to a point near the Northeast Boulevard and Southampton Avenue. And obviously with the costs being what they were, doubling for the Frankfurt L and the steel requirements, they had to break this up into 2 components. So they only built the first part as far as Lot Street, and they only built portions of double track, not a complete double track route. And we'll get into that more detail into the second program next month. Up in Bustleton, you can see there's an interesting photograph because these are one-man cars, Bernie cars that seat 33 passengers, and there's 4 motormen up in Bustleton posing for a picture with one inside. So it might have been a training run. I'm not sure, but it seems odd to see 5 motormen near one car. This is Bustleton, and as you can see, it was served by 2 railroads before the trolley line was built. On the right, a subsidiary of the Philadelphia and Trenton built the line up to Bustleton for the what would eventually became the PRR. That was in near Welsh Road. The Reading built their line in 1906 as part of the short line. It was opened in 1906. And the trolley came up in between them, ran on Old Bustleton, Welsh Road, and then Bustleton up to Lot Street. The second segment beyond Lot Street up to the boulevard was never built. This is the PRR operation. They used a converted farmhouse for their station in 1870. And I was very thankful to Fred Moore because he shared these pictures of a steam engine with a train. I'd seen the farmhouse picture many times, but seeing an actual Penske engine up there at the Bustleton station was a new surprise for me. The Reading station was built, like I said, in 1906. It was used for passenger service up until 1933 when the electrification for all the Reading suburban lines went into full effect. And they had much more frequent service available at Beth Ayres. So they discontinued passenger service to Bustleton at that time, but the freight station portion of the station building was still used afterwards. Now, why am I including this picture? This just became available to me. Part of the service that operated to that Bustleton station for the Reading went up the New York branch and used the 3rd leg of a Y up at Neshaminy Falls. That's where this tower is located. And so they would turn back and go down the short line and pick up passengers at Bustleton and Cheltenham and work their way back into Reading Terminal. In the evening, they would do a reverse. They would come out the short line and make a left-hand turn at Neshaminy and go back down the New York branch. Now to get into Bustleton, a bridge was required to cross over the Pennypack Creek. Well, they were hoping that they were going to get funding to repair and replace the Bustleton Avenue or Bustleton Pike Bridge over the Pennypack Creek, but that didn't happen. So they were forced to build this bridge. I believe it was built to be pretty much temporary, but it obviously lasted for quite some time. It had to be rebuilt in 1938. And then, of course, not only was the design probably less than they would have done if they had been fully funded, they started using heavier cars, double-ended cars. When ridership grew quickly, these cars started showing up on the line as early as 1928. Service to across this bridge ended in 1948, and the Bustleton Pike Bridge didn't get replaced until 1969. So things take some time. So now we've got the Frankford Elevated and Bustleton trolley completed. It's November of 1922, and now it's time to party. So everybody came out dressed to the nines. Some people came out in a horse-drawn carriage. Other people came out and, just stood for pictures, but apparently hats were not optional, so everybody had to wear their hats. They brought out a horse car to operate in the parade up to Bridge Street to commemorate the opening of the line for service. And apparently that car was around a year after the L opened up. I don't know what happened to it, but they obviously kept it in good repair for that first year. Up at Bridge Street, you can see there's the mob waiting to hear the speeches of all the dignitaries that were coming out, including the mayor and some officials of PRTC. On the right, they're inspecting the new Frankfurt cars. So there's where the podium was. It was located under that 68-ton beam. There's Mayor Moore and William Twining, who was the City Transit Division engineer. I'm sure there were PRT officials there, but I don't know who they were. Down at Oxford Avenue, we have the Bernie car on display for future riders, but in the background is an early example of photoshopping. Henniger's studio was to the right of this facility, and they somehow got superimposed the building behind the car. It was demolished and gone by the time that photo was taken. On the right is a plaque that was installed in the Hammonds building up at Bridge Street. It was taken down during the Frankfurt Transportation Center construction and stored, and no one seems to know where it is today. Somebody's basement. Up at the Bridge Pratt, you can see there's nobody on the platform. We're waiting for the first train to arrive. There's one single individual taken in the scene. There's the new cars waiting for the first passengers. This is what it looked like looking south from Bridge Street along Frankford Avenue before the elevated was constructed in 1918. As I said, that it paused at the Dyer Street. And then quickly between 1918 and 22, there's the elevated, there's the 1904 transportation building. And in the foreground on the picture on the right is an unusual car to be up here. It's marked special, so it probably brought some company officials up to the speaking engagement. Okay, so 100 years of the Frankfurt L. We're going to cover this material in detail in part 2. But these are some of the highlights that happened during that 100 years. The Delaware River Bridge opened up in 1939 after rapid transit was opened across the bridge. They closed the Delaware Avenue elevated. 1940, PTC was created. The Bud-built Frankfurt cars came with ventilation fans finally. In 64, SEPTA was created and it took over PTC in 1968. 77, the I-95 construction affected the lower end of the Frankfurt Elevated. We'll see that in more detail in part 2. You can see some of the other things that occurred that we will cover in more detail. And by 2022, the Frankfurt Elevated and Route 59 celebrated 100 years of service. So just to conclude, I want to go through some then and now slides for you. This is looking south from Spring Garden Street. There's a Philadelphia terminal warehouse building on the left, which is still standing to this day. You can see that the railroad street trackage is still there, but the elevated's gone. Of course, it's been relocated into the median of I-95. Up at Lehigh Avenue, things look pretty much the same, although the renting company YMCA building has been replaced by a U-Haul storage unit building. And Strathman's Lumber's building is still there, but I don't believe it's still operated as a lumber yard. At Tioga, we have a then and now. You can see in 1917, construction is starting on the elevated. By 1922, this head house building had been completed. And in 2022, there it is in all its glory. I went down there on a Sunday morning thinking it might be safe to take a picture of the building. Within 10 feet of my car to get this photo, I got propositioned. I met a Doberman pincher and I saw a drug deal go down. I don't advocate you doing that. Up at the dummy depot, you can see there it is. It's proud glory in its day. Today, it's the Arrett Street Transportation Center, which is an accessible facility now. There's another view of it, and I used the red arrow to show you there's the substation building that was built for the trolleys when they came in 1894. The larger building closer to you on the left picture behind the bus is the substation building that was built for the Frankford L and the Route 59 trolley. Up at Bustleton, you can see you had a 33 passenger Bernie car providing service up to Bustleton. Today, that's been cut back. You still have service on Route 59 to Bell's Corner using dual mode trackless trolleys. The dual mode is, for those of you who may not know, allows you, it has a small diesel engine in the back of the vehicle, which allows you to go off wire short distances in the event of a fire or any kind of disruption. And in fact, it's used underneath the L between the depot and the Arrett Street Transportation Center because those wires were frequently damaged. So they just used the diesel engine to pull out to the terminal. Up at Bridge Pratt, you can see the claustrophobic feeling you had when you were underneath the elevated looking north underneath at Pratt Street. And on the right, it's all open to the sky with the new Frankfurt Transportation Facility Center in service. The Hammonds building has been also upgraded. It's a Philadelphia Police, a SEPTA Philadelphia Police District office. And you can see the red arrow gives you the same side of the building that you're looking at. So when the elevated structure was there, you couldn't see this side of the building very easily because the L blocked it. And of course, part of the Frankfurt Transportation Center project was the opening of this 1,000-space parking deck. It really helped alleviate the parking situation in Frankfurt Terminal because there was a competition between the residents, the commuters, and in fact, the drivers. I drove here for a number of years, and it was a battle every morning to try to find a parking space. Another part of the project was to include driver parking off-street, which really helped the residents. One Frankford Avenue, you can see in 1917, a single truck car on the left. And today you have a modern bus coming down for Route 3 with the Cedar Hill Cemetery building in the back. And that's what it looks like today. Down on Frankford Avenue, down at Frankfurt Station, we have a situation where the station is no longer with us. It was closed by SEPTA in 1990. I was part of that closure. And like the original PRR sign, this sign too was, the lollipop was also put up for auction. I don't know what bids it took or what bids it received. As far as timetable progression, look how far we've come. We have the L cars on the cover of the 96 timetable, and the AdTran cars, and the precursor to the renaming of the Market Frankford Line to the L, and then finally the L that went into effect yesterday. These are the cars that have been operating on the Market Frankford Line, the AdTran cars, which introduced air conditioning to the service. And the older Frankford cars were actually repurposed. They were used in revenue train service and work train service. And you can see one on the right there. And now we have something new to look forward to. Another fleet of cars being built by Hitachi, the M5 cars with 200 in the order and a 40 car option. Delivery is expected in 2029. Significant cost, but these cars will have open gangways, longitudinal seating, regenerative braking, and automatic door operation. So we made it. Thank you. It's been a long journey. That's the end of construction in 1917. That's where that Route 4 car was. Because the war just stopped the project. They didn't give authority to continue with the project and provide steel for the project. So the steel was diverted to the war effort, and it took some time before, well, we had to win the war, and then the prices of steel went through the roof, so they had to get the money accumulated to purchase the steel. So for a period of between 1917 and 1922, it just stood like this. And then just as a reminder, a book which will go into much greater detail in all these things that I talked about tonight will be available for a donation of $25 to the Frankford Historical Society. And for those of you online, if you can see the image, maybe you can copy that down if you need a copy of the book or you'd like to get a copy of the book. And thank you very much. I'll take questions.